Hello, everyone, and welcome to Uncivil Law. I hope you're having a nice day. I'm having a nice day, and it has been too long since we've had a entry in stupid letter time. It has been way too long since we've had stupid letter time, and today we have stupid letter time, courtesy of the New York Times, which has come out against thinking and reason. Good. So we're going to read this article and comment on it in a thoughtful and critical way. So we're just going to immediately defy the article right from the very start, because here's what we're going to do. We're going to read it, think about it critically, and comment on it, which is apparently exactly what we're not supposed to do. So, but I think maybe we should think. That's my bold position. My hot take is I think we should think. Let's say if they can convince me thinking is bad. This should be entertaining. Let's get started with this stuff. Opinion by Charlie Warzel, opinion writer at large, New York Times. Opinion, don't go down the rabbit hole. Critical thinking. I don't need notifications from Windows right now. Critical thinking, as we're taught to do it, isn't helping in the fight against misinformation. Thinking is not helpful in fighting misinformation. What you should do is not think. That would help more with misinformation. I mean, right off the bat, that seems incredibly counterproductive. If you're presented with misinformation, wouldn't blindly accepting it be bad? Wouldn't critical thinking be better? But critical thinking apparently makes you more likely to believe misinformation? Somehow? I'm not sure. Perhaps he will clarify along the way. Okay, let's read his opinion about why we're not supposed to be critical thinking. Okay. Foreign academic Michael Caulfield has an odd request. Stop overthinking what you see online. Really? You should just take everything you see online at complete face value? You shouldn't think about the things that you're reading and consider their value or have questions or criticisms about those things? I mean, okay. That seems like a strange proposition. Mr. Caulfield, a digital literacy expert, he believes in literacy without thinking. Okie doke, at Washington State University, Vancouver, knows all too well. Why does Washington State have why does Washington State have a satellite branch in Vancouver? Just out of curiosity. Okay, knows all too well that at this very moment, more people are fighting for the opportunity to lie to you than perhaps at any other point in human history. So wouldn't that make thinking and critique and critical thinking even the more valuable? If more people are trying to lie to you or misinform you, wouldn't that presumably make critical thinking and critical reason all the more important? Because you should be even more skeptical that people are misinforming you? Oh, Vancouver, Washington. Oh, okay, that makes a lot more sense. Thank you. Misinformation rides the greased algorithm rails of powerful social media platforms and travels at velocities and in volumes that make it nearly impossible to stop. That alone makes the average information warfare an unfair fight for the average internet user. So, the average internet user is not in a position to deal with a lot of people who are making false or misleading claims. So they should stop thinking and just accept the claims blind? But Mr. Caulfield argues that the deck is stacked even further against us. That the way we're taught from a young age to evaluate and think critically about information is fundamentally flawed and out of step on the current internet. We shouldn't be we okay. For not an insignificant portion of my life, I've heard this phrase of don't tell people what to think, teach them how to think. It is not ideal to teach them what to think. Much better is why or how, because then they can evaluate information for themselves. So, teaching facts and like dates and stuff is probably not as important as teaching how to reason. Because you can always look up facts. Like, I never really bought into the concept of like memorizing particular dates of events. I mean, it's helpful to know like vaguely when things occurred so that you don't make a complete jerk of yourself. So you like at least can vaguely pin it down, but you don't need to know the exact date that like the battle of whatever occurred, because you can always look it up, right? That's probably not important information to have right off the top of your fingers. But in looking it up, it would be helpful to know how to think and how to reason so you can evaluate whether or not what you're reading is true. So if someone says like the battle that D-Day occurred in the 14th century, you can be like, that doesn't make sense. D-Day occurred in World War II. How could it occur in the 14th century? Right? Instead of just blindly thinking, oh, D-Day must have occurred in the 14th century. Maybe teaching people how to think would be good. But apparently teaching people how to think and critical reasoning is bad, very, very bad. Okie doke. We're taught that in order to protect ourselves from bad information, we need to deeply engage with stuff that washes up in front of us. That sounds like a good plan to me. Mr. Caulfield taught me recently. He suggested that the dominant mode of media literacy, if kid gets taught any at all, is that you'll get imperfect information and then use reasoning to fix that somehow. Seems like a good plan. You might read things that are not true. If you reason, you might be able to spot those things and then reason how to find things that are more accurate. But in reality, the strategy can completely backfire. Okie doke. In other words, resist the lure of the rabbit hole, in part by reimagining the media literacy for the internet hellscape we occupy. All right, that's fine. It's often counterproductive to engage directly with content from an unknown source, and people can be led astray by false information. Yes, people can be led astray by false information. That's definitely true, which again, presumably would make it all the more important that you have the ability to reason and think, so you can make it more likely that you will spot bad information. And you can critically think about the information that you do know and why you know it. Influenced by the research of Sam Weinberg, a professor at Stanford, and Sarah McGrew, an assistant professor at the University of Maryland, Mr. Caulfield argued the best way to learn about a source of information is to leave it and look elsewhere, a concept called lateral reading. Well, that's actually not too bad an idea. And that might go very well into the idea of teaching people how to think and how to reason. So if you see something, particularly something that's surprising, it might be a very good idea to look at other sources and not trust one source in particular blindly. That would be an example of teaching people how to think. So if you see something that seems odd, you could go consult other sources and see what they say about that thing. And then hopefully you would learn that you would see a consensus, and that might be the valuable position. And if you want to take a non-consensus position, at least you would understand the consensus position and you might be able to find a flaw in it. Because just because it's consensus doesn't mean it's true. And we can point to any number of things in history that would validate that. So, but you could, the idea of lateral reading is a pretty good idea. Read other things. Read other sources. Read from a wide range of sources. Read from right-wing sources and left-wing sources. If right-wing sources and left-wing sources agree as to facts, right, those facts might be reliable. So read from a wide range of sources and then draw your own opinions. Could be good. I'm not opposed to lateral reading. I'm not sure how it's incompatible with critical thinking, but okie doke. For instance, imagine you were to visit Stormfront, a white supremacist message board, to try to understand racist claims in order to debunk them. Okay, well, I'm not sure why we're necessarily leaping to such an extreme example, but okie doke. I mean, if you wanted, this is probably an exercise best left for higher education, but trying to understand how racists think might be a good idea, because then you would be able to understand how to talk to them in a way that they might appreciate. You know, understanding where someone is always a good thing when you're trying to teach them something. So if you were trying to do this on more of a higher education level and go to something to understand how they think and how they reason as a way of mechanism of trying to help them, that might be a good idea. Probably not so great if, for lower education, but, for higher education, this probably would be not the worst idea. Why do certain people think that way? How can we address them? How do I reach these kids? But I'm not sure why we're going to the most extreme example possible. I guess the reason we're going to the most extreme example possible is to say that going to Stormfront is bad. Therefore, thinking is bad. So that's like some sort of fallacy by going to the end of the page. Since the most extreme thing is wrong, more moderate versions are wrong. I don't know if that has a formal fallacy name. But yeah, if the most extreme possibility is wrong, every more moderate policy must also be wrong, which is like the exact opposite of the reasoned position. The reasoned position would be, if the moderate policy is wrong, the extreme policy must be wrong, because the extreme policy necessarily incorporates the moderate policy. And if the moderate policy is wrong, the extreme policy must be wrong. But to say the extreme policy is wrong, therefore the more moderate position is wrong, that doesn't really flow. But I guess we're using it to say thinking is bad. So, okay, fine. Even if you see through the horrible rhetoric, at the end of the day, you give that place however many minutes of your time. Yeah, but the purpose of the exercise in this hypothetical was to understand how racists think, right? Yeah, the purpose of you doing this in this hypothetical is to try to understand racist claims in order to debunk them. In this hypothetical you've constructed, your purpose is to try to understand racist claims in order to debunk them. Okay. So even if you see through the horrible rhetoric, which, okay, you've given that place however many minutes of your time. Yeah, but if your purpose is to understand how someone you vehemently disagree with thinks, then going to see how they think would be furthering that purpose. So it's not really a waste of your time, because you were trying to exercise a particular purpose. Maybe you realize in the end that that's not the best mechanism for it, so that's possible, but to suggest up front it's a waste of time seems odd. Because it's like, I want to understand how racists think. I've now gone there and give them minutes of my time. Yeah, to further my goal of understanding how racists think. So why was that bad? Fundamentally, why was it bad? It might be ineffective, but why was it bad? It seems like a plausible path of inquiry, to my mind, even if I wouldn't necessarily go about it this way, but okay. Even with good intentions, you run the risk of misunderstanding something, because Stormfront users are way better at propaganda than you. You won't get less racist by reading Stormfront critically, but you might be overloaded by information overwhelmed. Okay, well, again, this doesn't flow from the premise. I'll go back to the split screen. The premise in the article, the premise of this is, the reason I'm doing this is to try to understand racist claims in order to debunk them. That is my premise. His conclusion is, you won't get less racist. But that wasn't my goal. My goal wasn't to get less racist. My goal was to understand racism and how they think in order to debunk it. So, I won't get less racist. Okay, but that wasn't my objective. You told me my objective. It's in the premise. It's in the premise of the hypothetical. You're constructing the hypothetical. So you're master of the hypothetical. Your hypothetical is I'm going to Stormfront for the purpose of understanding racist claims in order to debunk them. That's your premise in your hypothetical. Now you say, I won't get less racist. Now, if I got less racist, I guess that would be a nice side benefit, but that wasn't my objective. So my failure to become less racist is not a failure of my objective. It doesn't flow from the premise. But you might be overloaded by information and overwhelmed. So you might not see through the propaganda. Because they say also that they were better at propaganda than you. So presumably that means that you won't see through the propaganda. Which means that you can't come up with an argument that beats the racist propaganda. Which seems like an odd position to take. It's like you can't come up with a position that will defeat a racist position. So you can't beat racists. It seems like a very odd proposition. Also, it's somewhat undone by experience. We've seen plenty of people who have become less racist. I just want to look at this guy's name because I always forget it. Daryl Davis. That was the name I was looking for. I always forget his name, which is not nice. But yeah, Daryl Davis is a good counterexample of this. Daryl Davis is a black gentleman who spent quite a lot of time around the Klan. And as a result of doing so, he has convinced 300 Klan members to not be Klan members. He apparently has a very nice collection of KKK robes at his house from former KKK members. Now, I don't know if he did this at any point by going to Stormfront. My understanding is he did it by going to Klan meetings and talking to members of the Klan and basically showing that he was a human being. And that was persuasive. So good for Daryl Davis. So it is possible to talk someone out of an extremely racist position. I've also seen Daryl Davis I've also seen the people trying to cancel Daryl Davis for hanging out with the Klan, even though, in the end, he was able to convince 300 plus Klan members to not be Klan members, which seems like a laudable goal. It would seem to be good that he has this large collection of Klan hoods going on. So he wasn't overwhelmed by it. So if Daryl Davis wasn't overwhelmed by the KKK rhetoric that he saw in person, I'm not sure why it's necessary that anyone else would become overwhelmed. And if Daryl Davis can find an argument that will beat the KKK rallies, because apparently he went to KKK rallies as a black guy, if he can beat arguments that will beat that, I'm not sure why you wouldn't be able to also not be overwhelmed. Daryl Davis wasn't overwhelmed. Why would you necessarily be overwhelmed? Are you saying that their propaganda is so good that if you went to Stormfront, you'd become a Stormfront member too? You can't even expose yourself to it lest you become a super duper racist? Even though, convincing people not to be racist is probably a good idea? I don't know. Seems very odd. Our current information crisis, Mr. Caulfield, that was an unintentional slip of the tongue, I apologize. Our current information crisis, Mr. Caulfield argues, is an attention crisis. The goal of disinformation is to capture attention, and critical thinking is deep attention. I suppose critical thinking is deep attention, but it's deep attention with a purpose. To critically consider it. Critically. People learn to think critically by focusing on something and contemplating it deeply, to follow the information's logic and the inconsistencies. Yeah, that would be a reasonable definition of critical thinking. Yes. You focus on it intently, and you think about the inconsistencies and failed logic, which is good. Because it's they've made a mistake in some fundamental proposition over here. I can correct this mistake and I can, be less stupid. So yeah, if you're thinking about something critically, it's like, oh, you've made some mistake here along the line in your reasoning. Somewhere up in the chain, maybe I can spot the problem. And maybe if you can expose the problem, maybe they'll be smarter. I try, and I don't know that I'm perfect at this. I'm certainly not claiming to be perfect, but I certainly try to expose myself to critical information, critical of my own position. The degree to which I succeed on that, I don't know, but I try to find arguments against my position so I can figure out if I'm stupid or not. The degree to which I'm accomplishing that goal, you can decide for yourselves, but considering why your position might be wrong seems like a good idea. Not to put too fine a point on it, particularly if you're a lawyer, because it is extremely good, if you're a lawyer, in my experience, to put yourself in the other lawyer's shoes and to argue the case as best you can from their position, because it makes your position all the better, right? What is their position? How can I make their position even better than they dreamed? How can I defeat that position? Right? So particularly as a lawyer, it is extremely good to consider the counter position. Because if you're not considering the counter position, and a judge asks you a question someday, you're going to have a bad time. So yes, it would be particularly good as an attorney to give your attention to positions that are exactly opposite of your position. Yeah. The natural human mindset is a liability in the attention economy. Okie doke. It allows grifters, conspiracy theorists, trolls, and savvy attention hijackers to take advantage of us and steal our focus. I mean, are we not in control of ourselves enough to decide who to give our attention to or not, or what arguments are so stupid, or decide our own goals? I mean, there's a lot of people out there trying to convince me of a lot of things, and I don't even give them the time of day. I'm only interested in certain things. So, Stormfront, for example, would not be one of those things. It is not worth my time. It is not my profession, so I don't have a professional reason to do it, and I have no personal interest in it. So, they might be trying, but it has no pull on me at the moment. Whenever you give your attention to a bad actor, you're allowing them to steal your attention from better treatment of an issue and give them the opportunity to warp your perspective. Also the exact opposite of that. First of all, you're assuming someone is a bad actor. And no one really thinks of themselves as a bad actor. I guess trolls do. So trolls probably know they're a bad actor, but that would be the only situation. But other people don't even know they're a bad actor. And for that reason, the road to hell is paved with good intentions. Right? So it's people who think they're good actors who can do the worst harm. And you don't know, maybe you are the bad guy, as we break out that Mitchell skit. Are we the baddies? Maybe we are the baddies. Maybe we should consider that proposition. So yes, we're giving them the opportunity to potentially convert us, and maybe we should be converted depending on what we're considering. But also we're giving ourselves the opportunity to critically consider our own position and make it better. If you want to make your own position better, it is bad to consider weak arguments. Straw manning the opposite side simply makes your own arguments weaker. Much better is to steel man the other side to make your position better. And if the other side has a position you can't beat, maybe it's worthy of consideration. And I've had that example happen even on this channel with positions where I'm like, okay, that's a good position I can't beat right now. Maybe I should consider it and work on it harder, right? And maybe that will eventually change my mind as I consider the position because I haven't been able to beat it yet. And I've had positions in my own life change by critically considering them. And I can't beat this argument. I can't beat this argument. And eventually I'm like, okay, maybe it's the right argument. So, that seems like a good thing, but apparently we're opposed to this for some reason. I don't understand. I'll take a few questions at this point because I've been talking for a little bit now. They also labeled Davis a white supremacist, yeah, when he attended the Minds conferences, basically chanted at him to prevent him from speaking. I know, right? Why are we opposing this guy? I don't know. Why are we opposing Daryl Davis? Why are we opposing this black guy who's converted 300 people from the Klan? Someone has to explain that to me on some level, because I'm having a real time understanding that one. I know they did it, but understanding why is a whole nother set of problems, which I don't get. Lisa says it's good talk, thank you. Joseph says it's the author's opinion of personal subject to propaganda. They could become useful idiots and must be protected for their own good for society. But then you're just making them weak. It's the problem. It's the problem every parent should at least be alerted to. You know, if your children are never confronted in any way, if you're too much of a bubble, then your children just make weak children. You know, if you never let them confront any difficulty, if you never let them confront any challenge, if you always are paving the way over everything, then when they get to the real world, they'll just be weak. Now, that is, of course, not to say that you should just throw your kids into the deep end. That's probably not a good plan, because there's a decent chance they will sink. In this example, by the way, the deep end is metaphorical. And so what do you do? What do you do if you're a parent? Well, the way you should teach your children, and this is well established, is you should teach them just above their current level of competence. You know, you want to give them a challenge that's within their current capability. So you don't want to challenge them at their level, because they're already there. So there's no point. You want to challenge them slightly above their level so that they will grow. That is the way to do this. And if you're always protecting your child so they never have any confrontation, they never have any challenge, you just make them weak. Does that mean that you should let them handle every challenge on their own? No. It means you should let them handle challenges that are within their current capacity. Well, no, that are just above their current capacity. And they might fail sometimes, and that's okay, because then the failure won't be that bad, because it's just above their current range, right? So if they fail, it won't be that bad. And then you give them and then it makes them grow. So that's how you solve this problem. This is like well established in psychology and learning development. It's not really hard. If you're protecting your kids all the time, they're going to have a bad time when they become adults. They're going to be weak. Abel says, this is a primary reason I subbed. I'm glad. Salvation says, I've heard the vaccine is not legally a vaccine, or you could shine a light on this perplexing statement. Yeah, and John Moriarty puts it in formal language, the proximal zone of development. Yeah, right. That's apparently where the phrase the zone comes from. When you say someone's in the zone, what they mean apparently is proximal zone of development, right? A challenge is just above their current level to give them the growth. And this also is just true of like physical skills too. If you are taking someone who's not been to the gym, or it's also true of just any skill. If you any skill, you have to do this. I'm a certified pistol instructor. I only teach people for fun though. And what some people will do, because they think it's funny, is they'll give someone who has no training in firearms a really powerful gun, because they won't know how to use it. And then, you know, it's funny, but it's just going to scare them away. It's totally stupid. How do you teach someone who's never shot a gun before? With a .22. That's the first thing you start with. Of course you do. It's easy. It's easy to use. It's no kick. You know, there's a reason, like the Boy Scouts, when they were still teaching this, I don't know if they still do, but they were using a Ruger 1022. There's a reason. There's a reason if I ever teach you, the first thing we're going to do is start with is a .22 pistol. We'll work our way up. I don't know about the vaccine not being a vaccine thing. I don't know what that means. So I'll look into it. But it's possible that the vaccine that's out there is somehow missing some sort of legal element of a vaccine. So maybe it's not a vaccine in some sort of technical sense. But I don't know what that is, so I can't comment on that intelligently. Joseph says, Davis proves an individual has an agency. That can't be allowed. Yeah, so, you know, okay. Well, that's a good question and answer. Thanks for the feedback, man. That's awesome. Let's continue on. And apparently, is this our protagonist? Yes. This is Michael Caulfield. So this is our protagonist over here with his somewhat vacant gaze into the distance. Okay, well, all right, well, good. One way to combat this dynamic is to change how we teach media literacy. Internet users need to learn that our attention is a scarce commodity that's spent wisely. I mean, that much is true. It is a spare commodity and should be used wisely. One of the things is that no amount of money will buy a second of time. That's very true. So, for better or worse, and possibly worse, I'm spending some of my time and some of my attention, which is a definitely non-renewable resource, talking about this article. So whether or not that's a wise decision, here we are. But yes, attention is a scarce commodity and you should use it wisely. You should be wise in how you spend all kinds of resources. That's a good tip. Maybe teaching someone how to think so they'll be able to evaluate what is and is not a good use of their time would be good. And maybe someone should teach me more so I could better evaluate whether or not this is a good use of my time. Because perhaps I've made the wrong decision. In 2016, Mr. Caulfield met Mr. Weinberg, who suggested modeling the process after the way professional fact-checkers assert information. That's a good idea. I'm not so sure that professional fact-checkers do this, incidentally, given what professional fact-checkers come out with. But yeah, trying to put ourselves in a position of a fact-checker is a good idea, so we're not deceived. Sure. Mr. Caulfield refined the practice into 4 simple principles. Okay. Stop. All right. I'm not sure why stop is the first step of this, but investigate the source. I don't know if you necessarily have to investigate the source, although that could be good, but considering other sources, find better coverage. I don't know about better, but at least different. Because better is subjective. What makes it better? You won't know in advance. Considering different perspective, different coverage. All right, trace claims, quotes, and media to the original context. Well, thank God, we definitely should be doing that. And even the media themselves aren't doing enough of that, taking things out of context. And this is otherwise known as the SIFT method, because of course we have to give it a nice sounding word. So the SIFT mechanism. Okay, I wouldn't necessarily investigate the source or find better coverage, because how do you know something's better? But considering different sources and different sources from different perspectives is a good idea. And if there are facts in commons, then those facts become more reliable. If 2 sources which are diametrically opposed agree on the same fact, the fact is probably reliable. Mr. Caulfield walked me through a process using an Instagram post from Robert F. Kennedy, a prominent anti-vaccine activist, falsely alleging a link between the human HPV and cancer. If this is not a claim where I have depth of understanding, okay, then I want to stop for a second and before going further, investigate the source or consider different sources. He copied Mr. Kenny's name into an Instagram post and popped it into Google. Look how fast this is, he told me as he counted the seconds out loud. In 15 seconds, he navigated Wikipedia and scrolled through the introductory section of the page, highlighting with his cursor the last sentence, which reads that Mr. Kennedy is an anti-vaccine activist and conspiracy theorist. Well, that's not a bad idea, but that's ultimately an opinion, that he's an anti-vaccine activist and a conspiracy theorist. I mean, it's ultimately an opinion. And again, teaching people how to think might be better. So using Wikipedia isn't exactly the worst thing in the world. It's a pretty reliable source, all things being considered. It's been shown to be as, reliable as Britannica, but of course it's not the end-all be-all. And you should consider other sources. You probably should not stop at Wikipedia. I use Wikipedia in my job sometimes. I definitely don't stop there. But yeah, Wikipedia can be a great resource to get a very quick overview so you understand more about what you're doing. But yeah, you should read some stuff so you can decide, as well as Wikipedia right. Is he a conspiracy theorist? Is he an anti-vaxxer? And even if he is those things, is he necessarily wrong? Because just because he is those things doesn't mean that what he's saying is necessarily false. Maybe what he's saying is true. Now it might mean, what does it mean to cause cancer? So let's assume the premise that it does in some sense. Well, what does that mean? How likely is that? How likely is that side effect, assuming it exists at all, compared to the vaccine benefit? That might be a thing that is worthy of consideration. So, as a factor. I mean, there's very little you can do that's free. There's very little you can do that's going to have zero negative possible repercussion. So I don't think the threat profile is serious enough in this case to justify not getting this particular vaccine, because what I understand of it, because this vaccine's been out for quite a long time when we're talking about HPV, I believe it was developed in the very late 90s, if memory serves correctly. So we have 20 years of history on this. I don't believe there's enough evidence of countervailing factors to justify not getting it. The countervailing factors appear to be so low in incidence that it's worth the risk. And there's very little that's risk-free. So, but knowing that doesn't seem inherently bad. Assuming it's true at all. Is Robert F. Kennedy Jr. the best unbiased source of information about vaccine? I'd argue no. Fair enough. And that's good enough to know we should probably move on. Or consider other sources and see what the consensus is. And, with 20 years in play, the consensus is somewhat reliable at this point. He probed deeper into the method to find better coverage by copying the main claim into the post and pasting into Google. The first two results came back from this is in French. Agency France Presse, fact-check website, and National Institute of Health. His quick searches showed a pattern. Mr. Kennedy's claims were outside the consensus. The scientist motivated by something other than science. Well, I don't know if that's necessarily his motivation, but it's outside the consensus, might be a reasonable conclusion, but you can't really speak to his motivation. Because you don't know enough, at least you don't know enough that's been put in this article to reasonably conclude his motivation. It might be anti-science. He might have ulterior motives, or maybe he's just a person who misunderstands science and has kind of doubled down and whatever. But, consider other sources. That's okay. The SIF method and the instructional teaching unit, about 6 hours of classwork. Really? We need 6 hours to this? Okay. That accompanies it has been picked up by dozens of universities. Also, I don't understand how this is not critical thinking. This seems like critical thinking. Consider the source is a reasonable proposition. Consider the source of the information as a reasonable proposition. If the source looks a little dodgy, and even if not, probably, consider other sources. Look for consensus. Look for consensus as to facts. So how is this not critical thinking? Is this different from critical thinking? I'm not sure. What's potentially revolutionary about SIFT is it focuses on making quick judgments. A SIFT fact check can take, and should take, just 30, 60, 90 seconds to evaluate a piece of content. But it takes 6 hours to teach somehow. Okay. Yeah, and then, Einstein was outside the consensus, right? So the consensus as to facts, right? And being outside the consensus isn't necessarily bad, particularly if you're looking for things. Yeah, non-consensus positions become consensus positions sometimes. So the consensus isn't necessarily right. That's true. And so you should, especially if you're a scientist, you should be critical of the scientific consensus too. Because you can run into groupthink just as much as everyone else. Now, of course, that shouldn't be read to understood that every non-consensus position will eventually be correct. Most non-consensus positions are crap, as I'm sure we can appreciate. The vast, vast majority of non-consensus positions, for example, in science, are crap. I think we can probably agree on that. But yeah, every once in a while, and perhaps more frequently than I'm giving credit for, a non-consensus position does become accepted. And people should challenge consensus positions when they have enough education to challenge the consensus. Einstein had enough to challenge the consensus and to prove that he was right. So yeah, but that we shouldn't We shouldn't run into the fallacy that because Einstein was right, therefore every non-consensus position is an Einstein waiting to happen. Most of them are just crap. So, you have to wait for them to be able to prove their position. And Einstein was looked at skeptically, as he should have been at the time before people accepted him as the new consensus. So, they were challenging him as they should. That's good science. So, that's what I have to say about that. Why did my article go away from my screen? Why did it go away? Why has OBS failed me? OBS has failed me. Why has OBS failed me? No. OBS has totally failed me. Why has it done this? The difficulties of streaming, man. I guess I'm going to have to close the article and reopen it, but if I do that, it's going to mess with my dimensions. But I have no alternative. So I'll be back, I guess. I'm sorry, guys. OBS gave up on me. Oh, I want to close this. I want to open a new window. I really hate it when this kind of thing happens because it makes me look incompetent. And also it disrupts the flow of the stream, which I don't like at all. Is OBS just going to completely give up on me completely? Hold on. OBS has just completely given up on me. I can't fix it. I can't fix it. Well, I know it's not an ideal solution because I'd rather share the text with you as I'm reading, but I can't do it in OBS. YouTube is blocking my channel? Not really, if you guys are watching it. All right. And besides, it's not a problem with YouTube. It's a problem on my end. It's a problem with OBS. What if I open it in Chrome instead of Firefox, maybe? Let me try that. Let's see if that makes any difference. Or open it in Firefox rather than Chrome. Because I'd rather have it on screen with you at the same time. You can restart OBS and reconnect the broadcast. The problem, OBS is streaming. You guys are seeing me. The problem is that OBS will not add the window. OBS will not add the window. That's the problem. OBS is streaming. I mean, you guys are seeing me. It's just that for some reason, it won't add the window anymore. It's gone. It's just gone. I tried changing capture method. I tried that. I tried deleting the window and adding it. I tried that. I tried all the things. And unfortunately, what a lame thing this is, because I was on a nice roll and OBS has completely failed me. I can't open it. I can't do it. I can't open OBS. It won't add it. It won't change it no matter what capture method I select. Oh, thank God, finally. Jeez Lord. That really irritates me. Where was I? The 4 steps are based on the premise that you often make a better decision with less information than you do with more. You make a better decision with less information. Also, spending 15 minutes to determine a single fact in order to decipher a tweet or piece of news coming from a source you've never seen before will often leave you more confused than you were before. The question we want students asking, is this a good source for this purpose, or could we find something better relatively quickly? Okay. I've seen in the classroom where a student finds a great answer in 3 minutes, but then keeps going and ends up being won over by bad information. Well, if they were won over by bad information, then a couple things have gone wrong, and maybe you should be probably teaching them how to think rather than what to think. If less authoritative information is beating more authoritative information, then maybe there's a problem with what to think. Or maybe there's a problem with the authoritative information. Yeah, Rakita Lai says troubleshooting live is awful. Glad it got resolved. Yeah, no joke, Rakita. Thank you. It's a total nightmare. Total nightmare. I appreciate the support, man. I really do. SIFT has its limits. Well, it has its limits of being stupid. It's designed for casual news consumers, not experts or those attempting to do deep research. A reporter working on an investigative story or trying to synthesize complex information will have to go deep. But for someone just trying to figure out basic fact, it's helpful not to get bogged down. We've been trained to think that Googling or just checking one resource we trust is almost like cheating. But when people search Google, the best results may not always be first, but the good information is usually near the top. Often you see a pattern and links to consensus that's been formed, but get deeper in the process, it gets weirder. It's important to know where to stop. I mean, I guess you should stop when you feel like your inquiry has been satisfied and you feel like you've reached a sufficient consensus, or you have reasons to doubt the consensus. So, I mean, that would be the logical place, but we're teaching against thinking because it's like, well, once you've found that authoritative source, man, there's no reason to keep looking. If the authoritative source says it, you can just stop thinking about it. The authority must always be right. It's a strange proposition. It seems like an invitation towards authoritarianism. The authority must always be right. There's no need to question the authority. So it's not governmental authoritarianism, it's educational authoritarianism. The authority must be right. There's no reason to question it. Seems like a bad idea to me, but what do I know? You know, the things I say are not true, or they're not true or true because I say them, right? They're true or not true because they're true or not true. And it's one of the reasons, for example, that when I'm reading cases, I put them on screen. So you can see what I'm reading is accurate, or if I make a mistake, you can see it. It's one of the reasons I got really frustrated when I was unable to put this on screen. So I want you to see the original that I'm commenting and critiquing against. So you can say, well, I believe the original, or I believe Uncivil Law. I don't think I'm perfect. I think I can make mistakes. So maybe you should critically consider whether or not what I'm telling you is true. And one of the things I do to make sure that you can do that is by putting the original on screen to give you something to critically consider. Maybe I'm misreading it, maybe I'm misunderstanding it, or so forth and so on. As much as I would like on some level to say, you should not critically consider things I say, and you should just blindly believe everything I tell you. As much as that would be inflating for my ego, and kind of nice, because having a whole bunch of people who believe in you completely blindly is kind of attractive, which is probably why we get cult leaders. So there's some part of me that's yeah, that would be nice, just having a whole bunch of people who blindly believe everything I say, even if it's contradictory. However, I don't think that would be the best course of action for you to blindly believe me. You should look at other YouTube lawyers. You should look at other sources. We think about things differently, amazingly enough. Christina Ladman, an assistant political science professor at the University of Nevada, Reno, has seen the damage firsthand. While teaching an introductory class as a PhD student, she knows her students had trouble vetting sources and distinguishing credible sources from untrustworthy information. During one research assignment on the 2016 presidential race, multiple students cited a debunked claim from a satirical website claiming Ben Carson, a candidate that year, had been endorsed by the KKK. Well, trying to figure out that the source is satire, and if they can't figure out it's satire, then something has definitely gone wrong. Some of these students have never had someone even talk to them about checking sources or looking for fake news, or apparently the concept of satire. It was just uncritical acceptance if it fit within their narrative, or complete rejection as it didn't. Which I'm sure, in absolutely no sense, is any sort of problem for Christina Ladman. I'm sure Christina Ladman at no time, or in no way, just uncritically accepts things that fit within her narrative, or completely rejects it if they don't. I'm sure Ms. Ladman has no problem and no bias, and is able to accept sources that agree with her and disagree with her in equal measure. If she can truly do that, she's a better person than me. And here is Miss Ladman looking steely-eyed into the distance. We like our 1,000-yard stare shots here at the New York Times. Miss Ladman started teaching a SIFT-based media literacy unit in her political science classes because of the method's practical application. The unit's short, only 2 weeks long. That sounds like a lot of time. That sounds like a lot of time. Her students latched on to quick tricks like how to hover over a Twitter handle and see if the account looks legitimate or is a parody account or impersonation. They looked how to do a reverse image source using Google to check if a photo has been doctored or if similar photos have been published by trusted media outlets. Trust the authoritative sources. Trust authority. Students were taught to identify claims in Facebook or Instagram posts and with a few searches decide, even if they're unsure about the veracity, whether the account seems to be a trustworthy guide or if they should look elsewhere. Well, I suppose evaluating whether or not someone is trustworthy or not is a reasonable thing, because we should probably be skeptical at best about sources that look untrustworthy, and sources that are more trustworthy we can trust a little bit more. It's one of the reasons to move to a completely different subject for a second. It's one of the foundational bases of trademark law. I know this seems like an aside, but bear with me. One of the fundamental rationales for trademark law is not the business, but the consumer. One of the reasons trademark law exists is because if you know that the thing is authentic from that source, you will be able to evaluate the source based on prior experiences with the source. So one of the reasons that we work so hard to protect a business name like McDonald's, just to pick a name out of random, McDonald's, if you're going into a McDonald's, you're going to get an authentic experience. Now, based on your prior experiences, you will know whether or not that's something that appeals to you or not. Or whether or not it's a BMW product, or whether it's an Apple product, or whether it's insert X. One of the fundamental reasons trademark law exists is because the reputation of the brand can be informative to the consumer as to other things associated with the brand based on prior experiences with the brand. If the brand produces good things, you will think they're good. If they produce bad things, they think they're bad. There's a reason that no matter what Apple produces, people will buy it. Because there are people who have prior associations with Apple and believe that they produce good products. Right? And there's people who think the opposite of those things and will not buy their products for the exact same reason. So if Apple puts out a product, some people will automatically buy it and some people will never buy it, even though it might be good or might be bad, as the case might be, because that's the fundamental point of trademark law. So you can also look at this in addition as just source credibility. If a particular source has been reliable in the past, then you can more likely rely on its reliability. If it's been less reliable, it's less likely. If someone lies, they're more likely to be a liar. If someone doesn't lie, they're more likely to be telling the truth. It's one of the reasons that credibility and reputation can be so important. Because people will base your statements based on past experiences with you. So trying to figure out if a source is credible or not is probably a good idea. And trying to challenge your own beliefs seems like a good idea, but I still don't understand how this is completely inconsistent with logical reasoning. I will now take another break and answer some more questions that we've built up along the way. Abel Baker says it's actually abductive reasoning. If it looks like a duck, okay. Did I challenge OBS's views? I don't know. I tried changing the capture method, but thank you for the suggestion, Rakita. It didn't seem to work for some reason. I had to change browsers completely before it would play nice. Joseph said, all good. You're a pro lawyer learning to be a pro podcaster. I'm staying. Love what you do. 10,000 hours to become an expert. Something like that. Folinsky says, I thought logic at university, and I thought I was taught, presumably, logic at university. I majored in political science. Does the university and colleges teach it? I mean, no, not unless you take it. I took formal logic, which was really cool. I liked formal logic. But I don't think everyone takes it. So, formal logic was pretty cool. I like that class. The goal isn't to make political judgments. Really? Are we sure? Or talk students have a particular point of view. Really? Are we sure? Really? But to get them to understand the context of a source of information, make decisions about its credibility. The course is not precious about overly academic sources either. That's a strange use of the word precious. The course is not precious about overly academic sources. That's a strange use of that word in my mind. The students are confused when I tell them to try and trace something down with a quick Wikipedia search because they've been told not to do it. Not for research papers. Yeah, using it as your source in a research paper might be bad, although I've occasionally used it in professional correspondence, which is always fun when you can use Wikipedia to spec somebody down, because it's a lot of fun. Not for research papers, but if you're trying to find out if a source is legitimate or someone has a history as a conspiracy theorist, and show them how to follow the page citation. It's quick and effective, which means it's more likely to be used. Okay. As a journalist who can be a bit of a snob, you don't say about research methods. It makes me anxious to type this advice. Use Wikipedia for quick guidance. Spend less time torturing yourself with complex primary sources. Ooh. Heaven forbid we look at multiple complex primary sources to come out with an extremely well-rounded opinion. And part of my brain hears this and reflexively worries these methods could be exploited by conspiracy theorists. Right, which is probably why it's a good idea to critically think. But listening to Miss Latham and Mr. Caulfield, yeah, it is Miss Latham, and Mr. Caulfield describing disinformation dynamics, it seems to me that snobs have it backwards. Okie doke. Think about YouTube conspiracy theories or many QAnon or anti-vaccine influencers. Their tactic, and Mr. Caulfield noticed, is to flatter viewers while overloading them with 3-hour videos laced with debunked claims and pseudoscience as well as legitimate information. Yeah, every source might be true and might be false in part, and being able to critically consider those for its truth or false value seems like a good idea. The internet offers you the illusion of explanatory depth. Until 20 seconds ago, you never thought about, say, race and IQ. But suddenly someone is treating you like an expert. It's flattering to your instinct, and so you engage, but you don't really stand a chance. Well, I mean, not to put too fine a point on it, and, I don't even know how to phrase this without getting completely canceled, but we're going to try. There have been studies that have suggested that there might be IQ differences. Now, what that's due down to is a whole nother set of problems. It might be environmental, it might be cultural, but there does seem to be a thing there. And then, of course, this ultimately materializes when you go down this road in the very famous Jewish question, which is always super fun to try to address in any sort of academic way. Because it is well noted that Ashkenazi Jews, and I don't even know how to say this without seeming like a total, it's well noted that Ashkenazi Jews have about a 15-point bump on their IQ relative to other populations. So they're about a standard deviation smarter on average than normal. And someone might ask, well, why is that? And then you can go down that road and you can get into really dark territory if you're not careful. But the underlying question is valid, particularly if you're interested in trying to correct the problem for people who do not have that advantage. So trying to understand why it's happening might be helpful if you're trying to raise people who currently don't have that benefit. So, but you can't consider this possibility unless you first understand the issue. And so, I think I got away with all that, but that was a treacherous road to walk. Just to acknowledge the possibility that IQ may not be completely consistent between different groups. And it's touchy territory, but okay. I mean, but then how you treat that information is a whole different thing, because you don't have to get that information and then be racist, or then think that someone's better or lesser. You might ask, well, why is that true? How can we correct for that? What might we take? Why is this being caused? And so forth and so on. But so that was fun. That was super fun trying to walk that tightrope. Yeah. That was a pain. That was annoying. What he described as a kind of informational hubris that we've seen is quite difficult to fight. But what SIFT and Mr. Caulfield's lessons seem to do is flatter their students in a different way, by reminding our attention is precious. The goal of SIFT isn't to be the arbiter of truth. Are we sure? Are we sure? Because the method isn't less interested in political judgments. Are we sure about all that? Mr. Caulfield and Miss Lanham noticed students across the political spectrum are more likely to embrace it. By the end of the 2-week course, Miss Lanham said students are better at finding primary sources for research papers. Why is it? I don't fully understand. This is a problem going forward for my channel too. And I don't know how to really address this problem. So I'm going to take an aside to talk about this for a second, because I don't know how fully to address this problem. I have a non-insignificant number of videos that get demonetized for covering particular topics, and I don't know what to do about it, because I want to cover all the legal topics, because I want to be all the legal smart. I'd like to have all the legal knowledge. That'd be great. I want all the legal knowledge. I want all of it. I want to start having people in different fields come onto my channel. I want to have experts in different fields of law talk to me so that I can gain their knowledge and become the omniscient lawyer. That'd be great. I'm working on it. But I don't like the feeling of having to walk around on eggshells so much, because there's the YouTube algorithm is not necessarily friendly, and I don't know what to do. Should I just stop covering particular topics altogether? I don't know how to solve this problem. Anyways, going back to the article. Students tend to be less defensive when confronted with an information they disagree with. Even if their opinions on broader issues don't change, a window is open that makes the conversation possible. Perhaps most promising, she has seen her students share the methods with family members who post dubious news stories online. It sounds so simple, but I think teaching people how to check their news sources by even a quick Wikipedia can have profound effects. Well, checking things is not the worst idea I've ever had. Excuse me a second. I gotta find the right emoji for this one. Moving back to this article. SIFT is not an antidote to misinformation. Poor media literacy is just one component of a broader problem that includes more culpable actors like politicians, platforms, and conspiracy peddlers. If powerful, influential people with the ability to command vast quantities of attention that use power to warp reality and platforms don't intervene, no mnemonic device can save them. Well, no mnemonic device can save them is probably true, just full stop. Because, yeah, if you're relying on a mnemonic device to save you, we have problems. But SIFT may add a bit of friction in the system. Most importantly, it urges us to take attention we save with SIFT and apply it to issues that matter. Right now we are taking the scariest, most valuable resource we have, our attention, and we're using it to try to repair the horribly broken information ecosystem. We're throwing good money after bad. Our focus isn't free, and yet we're giving away with every glance at a screen. But it doesn't have to be that way. In fact, economists are in our favor. The economics are in our favor, sorry. Demand for attention is an all-time high, and we control supply. It's in time we increase the price. Well, kind of witty on the conclusion, but yeah, overall I had a lot of problems with this article. So yeah, I think thinking is good. That's my end conclusion. So having considered all this, I think education is good. So, yeah. Let's take some questions. Joseph, the mere mortal cannot be trusted with information like IQ data. He'll become a useful idiot. He'll become racist. Censorship will save us. See, you don't have to become racist about it. You don't have to become racist. You can become curious. And you might wonder why is it being caused? And is there anything we can do to solve the problem? Or is it, maybe it's not real, maybe it's not even real. Maybe we're testing for it wrong in some way. Or, I mean, there's all kinds of things you can do, but you don't have to become racist about it. Snow White says, would euphemisms work? That's what I try to do right now. It's just by rewriting things. Joseph, locals or rumbles? I've been thinking about locals. Nick Rakita has gone on to on the locals. I was asking Nick yesterday on stream, can I hijack his locals for a while to see if I like it? He didn't seem particularly enthralled by that possibility. He didn't seem to like the possibility of me hijacking his locals and us doing a joint thing. He didn't seem to be into it, but locals is a possibility, I think. Do BitChute? Yeah, I was looking at BitChute for a while and bring a little reason to the very saturated medium. I did have BitChute for a while, and now I'm using Utreon as a backup, but yeah. Joseph says, perhaps migrate to Rumble, maybe. Vanilla topics on YouTube and all topics, such as spicy ones on Rumble. Mention your... Yeah, I'll have to consider, is Rumble or locals the way to go? And what is the advantages and disadvantages between Rumble and locals? That's a good question that I'll have to look into. Vanilla topics on YouTube and all topics such as spicy ones on Rumble. Mention your audience of both. Over time, you'll be likely to drop one or the other. That's probably true. Renette Ashley says the more YouTube okay content could come on here and the other stuff could go otherwhere. That's a good idea. That's a good idea. So I could, that's actually a pretty good idea. So I could, that's actually a good way to make something, to give someone some reason to go on to something like a Rumble or something like a locals, to save the spicier topics for those as exclusives is actually a pretty good way to go. So that sounds pretty good. So yeah. I think neither Rumble nor locals has live streams at the moment. But I think they're both coming there. But it's a pretty good idea. I've been part of Viva Barnes on local. There's a huge difference between Rumble and locals. Rumbles is only to host videos. Locals is a community much like Discord. Okay, that makes a lot of sense. So locals is like a curated Facebook. That makes a lot of sense. And so if the locals things really takes off, then I might get rid of the Discord completely. If it's really good, because I don't know, the Discord was always just a temporary thing anyway. It was always started as an experiment. So yeah, if the locals things really, really works, then maybe I'll get rid of Discord or change it completely or something. Because yeah, that might be a way to go. So yeah, maybe locals is the way to try this. So several creators on local do Zoom calls instead of live chat. Okay, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah. So yeah, maybe I'll do a locals page. I'll see if Nick can hook me up. I'll see if Nick Rakita can hook me up with the locals page. So yeah. Anyways, I appreciate the feedback. If you're enjoying this content, please remember to like it. If you're not a subscriber already, please subscribe. And for 99 cents a month, at least here, you can become a member of the channel and help to support us financially. I appreciate all your support. I appreciate all the questions. I appreciate being able to interact with you. This is a lot of fun for me. Until later, my friends, cheers and goodbye.